up and out. So it's great to see you, and thank you all for making up your time. And I hope that you're going to get something out of today, because it's a really, we've got some great people here today, and it hopefully be a really powerful meeting. And ideally, I suppose this is the start of a journey that we want to do to make Oxfordshire a greater and a better place for people to live, work and play. So we've got some really key players from across the county here to help us develop and plan as to what we want to do. I'm sure it will provide quite a varied perspective for you all as well. So we've got a range of speakers from different backgrounds giving us different perspectives on their view of what they've done, but also some of the things that need to be done in the future. So we need to think about all the challenges that we still face. And whilst Oxford is sort of the least inactive county for both adults and children, and that's a very clunky phrase, but I'm sure you all know what I mean. We've still got quite a lot to do in terms of improving the physical activity and the health, reducing the inequalities across Oxfordshire. Before we go any further, one thing it's obvious that we need to mention is COVID and the coronavirus. That's one of the reasons we're all here sitting in our various homes, offices and whatever on doing an e-conference. I think if you'd have said 3 months ago to a whole range of us that we were going to all be sitting at home doing participating in a conference with 60 people, I think I know I would have laughed anyway. So it's a very different world that we're all working in now. So much has changed, and I think that, the crisis is far from over, but we're at least now coming to the stage where we begin to think about and plan about re-entry and what we can do and what this new normal will look like. And I think there are some things that we can all learn from how we responded, and there are some other things that we might need to think about how we could have done better. But also the one thing I did want to do, and I'm sure you'll all join me in this, is to thank all the amazing work that the essential workers have done, the army of community volunteers, the way Oxfordshire has responded to Oxfordshire All In has been absolutely fantastic. And I know most of you here work with or represent organisations that have responded outstandingly. That's the only word I can find to the crisis and the challenges that we've all faced. So I think it's great that we recognise that, and if we could have a virtual round of applause for them, that would be great. I can't hear any of you, but I can see some of you clapping, which is great. So finally, you don't want to hear too much from me, but I'll hand over to the speakers in a moment. But finally, there's a few housekeeping issues that we need to do in terms of doing this conference virtually. As I said at the start, this is quite a new experience for a lot of us. So the first thing is, could you all keep yourselves on mute? I have, with the power that vested in me, I have muted you all, but could I ask you to keep yourselves muted, especially during the presentations? Don't worry about being able to ask questions, and because there's some time built in at the end. We've got 30 minutes at the end for a Q&A session, and Rosie has kindly agreed to host that and coordinate the Q&A session. So we've got an hour of presentations, then 30 minutes Q&As. If you have any questions, and hopefully you'll have lots of questions, if you could use them on the chat function, just type in the chat function, and Josh, who's sort of invisibly sitting here beside me, there's his arm coming in to wave, will coordinate and collate all of the questions and pass them to Rosie so she can ask the questions and point them out. So please do come up with your questions. Hopefully there'll be some really thought-provoking issues that come up, and there'll be lots of discussions and debate about it. So hopefully that's all clear. I don't think there's anything else I need to do in terms of housekeeping. I'm afraid I'm going to have to be quite brutal with speakers in terms of time. So please don't be offended if I do cut you off. We haven't found a way yet to do a virtual 5 minutes warning or anything like that. So apologies in advance. If you could keep to time, we'll sort of give you the nod when you're getting close to your time. But it would be great if you could keep to time to enable the Q&A debate at the end. Okay, without further ado, hopefully you can all still hear me. Right, okay. Is everyone else still on? Yeah, it's just
Alan, we can hear you well. So Sarah,
can you hear me, Paul?
Yes.
Okay,
Sarah,
you can't see me, but you can hear me. Okay, so in that case, hopefully you can all still hear me. I'd like to introduce Zara Fernandez, who's going to be our first presentation from the Oxford Hub and a key player in the East Oxfordshire Community Impact Zone. So Zara, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So I have spoken before about Ready, Set, Go, but I wanted to talk today a little bit about it, but also about the approach that we are taking to make sure that every child in Oxford City can learn to swim and cycle. So there is plenty of evidence that participation in both of those sports and activities is way lower for people from disadvantaged backgrounds. And working with Josh and Active Oxfordshire, we have been uncovering some of the stats, which are quite shocking. So, for example, in key community impact zone areas, only 30% of children can swim competently by age 11, compared to over 84% in North Oxford. So that discrepancy is based on a lot of different factors, and in order to tackle these sort of issues, we need to make sure that we are taking an approach which is rooted in how do you work with difficult and complex issues. We have been making lots of progress already, but I wanted to talk about 3 specific approaches that we are taking with this Ready, Set, Go project, which I think will be applicable to lots of other complex issues that you will be dealing with when it comes to involving people in physical activity. So the first thing, the first pillar of our approach is really embedding ourselves in local communities and actively reaching out to people to really understand what the barriers might be. So the starting point to a lot of these things in the community impact zone has been a public living room where people have come together and people meet in their own terms, but also enables us to have really day-to-day real conversations about what those families might need and uncover some of the barriers that we perhaps take for granted. So whether it is female lifeguards at the swimming pool for Muslim families, whether it is the fact that parents don't know how to ride a bike, so they cannot quite teach their kids. There's some things that we sometimes take for granted. The second very related aspect to our work is to really trust people who are closest to the issue. So really trusting those families and actually even working in a very granular way to support them in whatever it is that they need in the immediate in order to get active. So some of you may have seen on the podcast with Active Oxfordshire, one of our local mums in the community impact zone called Sophia, who has recently got her children on a bike, and actually it was talking about the specific barriers that we just saw. Actually, we can fix some of these barriers, which are predominantly financial barriers, by giving her and her children bikes so that they can start riding. And the final thing that we think is really important with Ready, Set, Go is to take a very collaborative approach and find partners with different strengths to help us scale up and tackle all of those different things. So some of them might be obvious partners, so people like Wheels for All, who can deliver tuition, or schools who really do know who are the kids who need it the most and can be a key player within that. Others are a bit more surprising. So actually, Hillsong Church has put their hand up and said, actually, if you need D-locks and if you need helmets, our church community would be really happy to help with that. So we're taking a really broad approach to partnership and mobilizing anyone who wants to effectively join the party to make sure that every child can learn how to swim and to cycle. And taking that broad approach has been really, really important. So we're very much at the beginning of the journey. We've just confirmed that 10 bikes are going to Spires and St. Christopher's tomorrow. So originally we were planning to do much more of individual referrals, which is the work that had started already. But actually in that adapting and learning approach that we're taking, we realize that schools right now have the most vulnerable kids. And actually with a much more open timetable, learning how to cycle is a great opportunity for outdoors activities while at school, but also for the kids to burn some energy. So schools have been super positive, and our first bikes and tuition are starting now. So it's really great to see that even despite all of the COVID upheaval that has delayed the project, we are beginning to make strides with cycling in particular. So yeah, that's all the news from me.
thank you very much, Sarah. That's really wonderful, and hopefully that's given people an insight into the work you've been doing, the fantastic work you've been doing, and hopefully there'll be lots of questions coming up from that. So thank you very much. Thank you. Can I now move on to Ansaf Azar, who is the new Director of Public Health in Oxfordshire. And wow, what a time to be a new Director of Public Health. Absolutely at the centre of all the crisis and all the stuff that has been going on. But I know from discussions with Ansaf, and I'm sure he'll say that he's absolutely committed to addressing inequalities across our society. So Ansaf, I think you've got a presentation, have you? That you're,
that's right, yes.
Yeah. So welcome, Ansaf, and thank you very much. I'll hand over to you.
Can I just double check how long I've got? Did you say 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, right, can everyone see the presentation? Yes, okay, got a thumbs up. Okay, so just to introduce myself, I'm Ansaf Azar, I'm the Director of Public Health for Oxfordshire County Council. I started my role back in summer, August 2019. It does feel like a lot longer than that, if I'm being honest. When I started that role at that time, I absolutely didn't imagine a pandemic at this scale or a magnitude. A little bit about my background. I'm a pharmacist by background. I qualified back in the early 2001. I've got a sort of a 20-year background in the NHS and the local government. I've moved into public health because I'm absolutely passionate about health inequalities and tackling health inequalities. I was a DPH interim DPH at Sandwell Council for about a year before I took on this role. And yeah, coming back to the COVID pandemic, I've never been in this scenario. This is a once in a lifetime pandemic. I don't think any of us have actually been in this type of scenario. And it's really shown some positive and negative sides. And I think the positive side is the way people have come together to tackle this. It's absolutely fantastic. And I just wanted to comment on that fact, because we have done things at pace. We have done things in a very innovative way where relevant. But I think one of the key things that COVID has pointed out is that, can I go to the next slide, please? One of the key things that COVID has pointed out is that it hasn't affected all of us in the equal way. There's a classic saying that we are all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. And I think it's very applicable for COVID. We know, for an example, certain communities are significantly more affected. Those people who are living in our most deprived areas are more significantly affected by this. The Black and ethnic minority group, their death rates are almost twice as more compared to the other groups. Older people are significantly more affected. Males are more affected than females. Those with comorbidities, those with deprived backgrounds are significantly more affected. So there is it has actually really shown a really cruel spotlight, if you like, in the inequality agenda. Next slide. So this particular slide actually points out how can I move on to the next slide, because I don't recognize this particular slide. Yes, thank you. I'll come back to that. So just want to focus on the inequality before I go into that. When I started my role, even before COVID, what I did started doing is to produce a Director of Public Health annual report. And then actually, well before COVID, what I wanted to do is I wanted to use the annual report to shine the spotlight on a particularly important issue, and that was inequality. And this is well before COVID. And just to point out the significance of that, the life expectancy gap between the most affluent and the least affluent area in Oxfordshire is almost 15 years. And if you look at the healthy life expectancy gap, that's even more. So there is a significant inequality across Oxfordshire, which gets hidden when we talk about it at Oxfordshire level. Next slide. So one of the key issues that I want to point out from the annual report is that if you look at, and this is the first thing that I noticed when I started, if you look at Oxfordshire as a whole, when you look at it, it is one of the most affluent part of the country. And when I look at all the public health indicators, they tend to be very green, and they look really good. But actually, when you dig deep into that, there are 10 wards in Oxfordshire that actually features in the 20% most deprived in the whole country, in the whole of England, and those are the 10 wards that are listed there. So I think it's really important that while we actually talk about things like inactivity, like Alan said, that we are actually the least inactive county, but when we look at it in these wards, we might get a different picture. So it's really important that actually we dig deep into that, because otherwise there is a real danger that we might resolve things at Oxfordshire level and widen some of our inequality. And the data is starting to suggest that. The data is starting to suggest the inequality gap between our most affluent and the least affluent areas are, if anything, is starting to get bigger. So next slide, please. Okay, so this again shows the difference between our most affluent and least affluent areas for both males and females, and it shows that the life expectancy gap it's quite significant. From if I take females for an example, a gap between 85 to 81 in females and 76 to 83 in males. So significant gaps there. Next slide. So this is again points out the difference in life expectancy, a gap, 15-year life expectancy gap, quite significant, and that gap is, if anything, is starting to grow. Next slide. So this is what, if you look at Oxfordshire level, what we can see at Oxfordshire level. When we look at, there are still areas that have got some significant issues. If you look at cardiovascular disease, you can see what you have is the rate is higher, 1.2 than national average. And if you look at cancer, if you look at depression, these are the things, even at an Oxfordshire level, that we do stand out, and we do need to address it. But actually, it's not just about Oxfordshire level. So if you move on to next slide. Now, I know you can't read this. Please don't try to read this. I think what I want to point out here is that what you have on your left-hand side, if you look at the screen, is the Oxfordshire data, and what you have on the right-hand side is the one of the 10 wards, the most deprived wards. So you can see they are pretty much the same indicators, public health indicators. They range from premature mortality, that's to number of to obesity, physical inactivity, all these indicators. If you look at it in Oxfordshire, they're pretty much green all along. But if you replicate the same indicators to Banbury Ruscote, which is one of the 10 deprived wards, they all turn red. And I think that's the danger if we just focus on Oxfordshire level. And that is why we need to actually look at data in a more granular level and try to address the inequalities. Next slide. And one of the areas where this is quite significant is physical inactivity. You know, even at an Oxfordshire level, people are doing. They are more physically active than, or less physically inactive. So the term physically inactive means that doing less than 30 minutes per week. And we know roughly 1 in 5 of our adult population is physically inactive. But I'm sure if you then look at that in some of our more deprived wards and some of our more vulnerable communities, that figure will be significantly higher. And we also know that physical inactivity, and these are the people who are doing no exercise, if you like, or no physical activity. that has a very strong correlation between developing long-term conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and so on. So if you think about 1 in 5 of our population are physically inactive, and potentially sort of deprived areas being much higher than that, this is going to create a bit of a perfect storm in terms of long-term conditions and demand for health and social care systems and so on. So it's really important to look at that in a preventative point of view. Next slide. Absolutely, yeah. Next slide, please. So one of the things that Oxfordshire is really strong on is healthy place shaping agenda. And as we come out of COVID, this becomes even more important. So we've talked about inequality, and we've talked about tackling inequality, and I think that's fine. We've got to tackle inequality head on, but we also need to look at the drivers that sit beneath that. The drivers that sit beneath these inequalities are often socioeconomic factors and the wider determinants. You know, the social circumstances and the environment in which people live can significantly trigger the way they behave. And we need to tackle these drivers as well. And when we come out of COVID and look at the recovery agenda, it becomes hugely important that we do that. The healthy place shaping agenda has got 3 elements to it, and one of them is about built environment. And it's really important that these kind of the measures like you know, doctor bike schemes, bike for key workers, all these things are being introduced as we come out of lockdown. And I think that is really positive that we do that. But again, right at the bottom, what's going to be absolutely key is that we actually focus on our most neediest of our population. Because one of the things we can do is introduce these kind of schemes, but not have the take up of those from our vulnerable communities and our deprived communities. So I think Oxfordshire has done really well in actually engaging with everyone to make sure that active travel is encouraged, but we need to remove the barriers for our vulnerable communities and for our disadvantaged communities, specifically from those 10 wards. Next slide. The second bit of healthy place shaping agenda is about community activation. So the support that we get from the voluntary sector organisation is going to be absolutely critical with this one. And again, COVID has completely changed the picture. COVID has actually made the vulnerable people more vulnerable, and it actually has increased the vulnerability of those people who weren't vulnerable before. So as we come out of COVID and as we look into our recovery strategy, it's really important that we look at our skills development. We build on the volunteering, because the work that we have done with our shielded community and the big work we have done with the vulnerable people during COVID is really, really fantastic. And there's a danger that we might lose that as we come out, and we need to build on that. We need to build our volunteering capacity and so on. And again, all along focusing on the areas of deprivation as well. And being mindful that the 10 wards that I've been talking about is just a conversation starter. There are communities that sits outside that geographical boundaries, and we need to pick those ones up as well. So that's really important. So as we come out of it, community engagement, tackling social isolation, working with the voluntary sector becomes massively important. Next slide. So the first bit I talked about is built environment. The second bit is about community engagement. The third bit is our health and social care models going forward. So these are the 3 things that forms the healthy place shaping, and this is also very important. We try to keep people as independent as possible. We try to do our best to prevent people from getting ill in the first place, but there will be always people who will need care. And actually what we need to do is to move into to that self-care dimension where people can help themselves. And I think what COVID has done is that it's accelerated this process. We've got GPs are now working in a very different way. People are taking their own blood pressure. People are having virtual consultations, and this thing has really accelerated. So I spoke earlier about there's lots of negatives about COVID and there's lots of positives about COVID. this kind of way of working, the engagement of health and social care with our communities has really changed during COVID. And I think that's changed to the positive. We need to build on that. We need to build on that. We need to create these virtual care pathways, and we need to create opportunities for social prescribing and welfare support and so on virtually. And again, focusing on our most deprived population. Next slide. So just to sum up and finish off, healthy place shaping is an agenda that will really play into tackling inequalities and tackling the drivers of inequalities. And I think, and I started that journey just before COVID, but actually COVID has massively reiterated that point and the importance of that, and making sure that is linked with our recovery agenda as we come out of COVID. And I spoke about the three elements: the built environment, the community activation, and the models of care. All these things, COVID has helped us to shape it even more positively, and I don't think we should lose that. And I think if we do that collaboratively, and this is the last point I want to make before I finish, this is not the job of one organization or one agency. It is the job of all of us, and without that, we're not going to be able to do that. And be patient, because this is not going to happen straight away. We're not going to see outcomes straight away. It's going to be a longer term piece of work, and we will see improvement, and we will tackle the drivers of inequality. And I think if you do that, we are in the path in the right direction. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Ansa. Thanks very much. Can you all? Hopefully, you can all hear me. Okay. Right, I seem to have lost the connection. I don't quite know what's going on because I'm in the office with Paul and the rest of the team, but it seems to be dropping me out. But anyway, we'll push on. So thank you ever so much for that, Ansaf. Lots of interesting food for thought there, and I'm sure lots of questions. Can I move on now to Ross and Nikki from Aspire, who are going to give us a real life experience and an example of why the type of work that we're doing in the community is having a real impact, and showing what can be achieved and done. Are you both here, Ross and Nikki?
I'm here. I'm not sure if Ross is here.
Yeah, Ross is here.
Okay.
Is he? All right.
Okay. So do you both want to unmute yourselves and start? That would be wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I'll just do a sort of brief introduction, and then I'll let Ross sort of speak and do his bit. So I'm Nikki. I'm the Head of Employment and Development Projects at Aspire, and part of that is managing our sport and activity project Strive. So Ross is here, who's sort of benefited and been part of the journey with our gym bus. So I think he's here to just explain a bit more about his journey and how he's found things to date, really. So Ross, is it all right to pass it over to you?
Presentation or anything?
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, you can just sit.
Hello? You hear me, everyone, yeah? I'm Ross. I got involved with Aspire 15 months ago now. I come out of treatment, engaged straight away with Nikki and people from Aspire. And an opportunity come up to drive the gym bus. So obviously grabbed it, done boxercise, done a lot of physical activity for my well-being. Yeah, and I'm a driver, and I think it's a big thing to get it out in the community. So I just heard earlier, most deprived areas, helping other people, mental health, drug problems. Yeah, I built up relationships, support network. Yeah, and I just keep growing with the support Aspire, other agencies, and yeah. It's weird talking to these cameras, but yeah, it's good, man. I just think at this time, in this climate, yeah, we need to be out there giving support to other people who are suffering. And I think the gym bus would be a great opportunity. It keeps that physical activity up, keeps people motivated. And yeah, for me, it's good to see people, the progression of people, working with people, helping people is a big thing for me. yeah, I just want to get back out there driving the gym bus because I've been given the opportunity and start, getting it going after all this stuff sort of calms down. Thanks, Nikki. Is that all right?
Good. Yeah. And no, thanks, Ross. And I thought it might be helpful as well if I just give a wee bit sort of context about the gym bus and the journey. So what happened was just over 2 years ago, we ran a project, sport and activity project. One of the findings from that was there was still a lot of people from sort of different areas that struggled to access some of the sessions and where they were held. Obviously, Oxfordshire is a big place, and a lot of the more rural areas, I suppose there's some issues around childcare. So we thought, why not get a mobile gym bus that can go literally anywhere? And then we approached Oxford Bus Company, who were totally in support of this, and we worked together with people and beneficiaries that came along to our sessions, and it was co-designed, co-produced. We literally worked on it sort of day in, day out for a while to get this bus on the road. So the gym is now sort of totally kitted out. It's got AstroTurf, it's got fitness equipment on it, it's got a TV, and it's totally ready to go. And well done to Ross for sort of coming through. He went through and he's now the bus driver. So the idea and the concept that we sort of drive this by is that we really try and sort of encourage and empower people that are coming along to become leaders. So it's like a lived experience leadership model. And that when we're engaging people in sport and activity, that provides some sort of, it's good for obviously your mental health, but it creates like a peer support model as well. And the idea with this is that we can then work with people to sort of raise aspirations and look at us that what you want to do longer term. So look, if somebody wants to come in and they want to just join a knitting club, that's absolutely fine. But a lot of other people have found that sport and keeping active has then become a tool to manage mental health and your recovery from drug and alcohol or any substance misuses. But it's also providing structure, because we work really closely within like the homeless pathway, and a lot of people are really from lower socio-economic backgrounds and lack structure, but it's realising the importance of sport and activity. So since the pandemic, things have sort of been put on hold quite a bit, but now it's just realised the importance of looking at how we can really sort of try and engage with communities and facilitate sports, but in a different sort of way. So if it's encouraging people to do stuff from home, access and navigate maybe different sort of apps, but really just trying to encourage people to get fitter and more active. And the idea with the gym bus is that we can literally take that anywhere. It's nice, it's bright, it's encouraging, it's quite informal as well. But it's essentially a mobile hub that can go anywhere in Oxfordshire and sort of rock up, quite informal, have people there that have sort of benefited as well, and we can try and promote and encourage more people to get fitter and active. And we can also run sessions, we've got speakers, all sorts like that. And it's working collaboratively with some of our partners that we've got. So Active Oxfordshire, they can sort of help us be more sort of strategic and just really looking at that collaborative approach and how we can really sort of target some of these inequalities in Oxfordshire through getting people fitter and active. So yeah, it's definitely it's been an interesting time, but it's looking at what we can sort of take on forward into the future. So yeah, that's it. So thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you both. Thank you, Nikki and Ross. That's wonderful. I did really worry at one stage, Ross, because I thought you were driving, but I was assured that you're not driving. So that's great. Okay, thank you both very much. That's really inspiring to hear and great. And if you can stay on to contribute to the discussion, that would be wonderful. Could I now pass on to Muir Gray, who's going to talk about some of the issues around how we enable older people to live longer. We know this has never been so stark before. We need to challenge and find new ways of doing this. And Muir, I'm sure, is known to a lot of you for his interesting thoughts and discussions on this. So we're delighted to have him here. So Muir, are you able to unmute yourself and talk? We've got 10 minutes, Muir, if that's okay. You could unmute yourself. I don't think we can hear you. Could you just unmute yourself? Muir, I can't. Can anyone else hear Muir? Muir, you might need to unmute yourself if you could. Can we, Paul, can we unmute him?
And we had this, I was at a meeting that he was speaking out for Cyclox earlier in the week, and he had exactly the same problem.
Right, okay. Let me see if I can, might see if we can unmute him.
Alan, could I suggest we ask Dick then if he would just give his piece on Go Active Get Healthy while we try and sort Muir out?
Yeah, let me just, yeah, okay. So, so Dick, are you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, would you be able to step in and do your bit on Go Active Get Healthy? We'll come back to Muir, hopefully, and we'll be able to unmute him because there's obviously some technical issue. So. Yeah. Being swift of foot, we're moving seamlessly on. So you've been doing the Go Active Get Healthy scheme across Oxfordshire, which is co-funded by the CCG. We coordinate it, but it's delivered across 4 local authorities. So it's a great example of joint working between health and social care. So Dick, if you could tell us a bit about that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, no problem at all. So what I'm going to talk about is a journey that I've been on for the last year, or just over a year, and particularly since I met Get Active Oxfordshire. The beginning of last year, I became quite unwell over a period of time, over a period of months, and I went to the GP. And at the end of April, I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. This for me was, I don't know, it's the most horrendous shock. I worked in the health service most of my adult life, and I was quite aware of the possible consequences of having diabetes, blindness, amputations, increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, and so on. And overnight, that very evening, I changed my diet. I knew I needed to lose weight. The doctor put me on insulin 4 times a day. My sugars were so out of control. They were really quite worried. They thought I'd probably have to go into hospital as an inpatient. But I knew I needed to lose weight. At the time, I had a BMI. Hello? At the time, I had a BMI of 33, to give you an idea. And changing my diet had some effect, but I also knew that I needed to do some exercise and speed the process of weight loss along, really. But there lies the problem. 63 years old, never joined a gym in my life. Really quite poor at sports, and in fact I was frightened of joining a gym because I thought it would be a waste of money. I'd give up after a short period of time and it wouldn't actually give me any benefit at all. And then I heard about Get Active, seated exercise, and I went along the following week. Fortunately, there was a taster session. I went along to that taster session and I was hooked. I don't know, the encouragement, the enthusiasm, everything that came from that meeting, I knew it was for me. So I started joining. I joined and started going to the sessions. And the people running it, Jenny and Lisa, were absolutely brilliant. Absolutely. They never made me feel uncomfortable. They never asked me to do something I didn't want to do, but they were full of encouragement. A few weeks after joining the sessions, I joined a gym. And a few weeks after that, I bought a bicycle and I currently cycle 10 miles a day. But nonetheless, the physical impact was that after 4 months, I came off insulin because I'd had such a good weight loss. And 4 months after that, I came off metformin, the tablet. And 8 months after diagnosis, I'm now in remission, and my diabetes is controlled by diet alone. And I've lost 20% of my body mass over that period of time. And my BMI just now is slightly less than 26. So I've got a few pounds to go to get onto 25, but it really is just a few pounds. But I'm absolutely convinced, none of this would have happened had I not met Get Active Oxfordshire. The encouragement those guys gave me really spurred me along. And I've had a lot of fun. But the one message, or another message I really want to give over is, whilst my goal was to be where I am, to have my diabetes in remission, I've been discharged from the Churchill Hospital. I'm just under care of my local diabetic nurse that only wants to see me once every 6 months to do a blood test. The other benefits of all this has been the fact that my confidence is just grown, really. I know that I'm probably fitter now at 64 than I was when I was 50. So for me, Get Active Oxfordshire has changed my life. It's certainly got rid of my diabetes in 8 months, and I'm really pleased.
Dick, that's absolutely fantastic and an inspiration to all of us. And thank you so much. I think it's really inspiring to hear, and actually to show the power of the program and the Get Active, Get Healthy program. And I think that's absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. Really inspiring. Thank you. And hopefully you can stay for some Q&As afterwards if you've got.
I'd love to.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think the technology has now allowed us to work with Muir. So Muir's back. So Muir, could I ask you to come in and do your presentation? Are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Wonderful. Thank you.
I switched off and came back in, which is what I always do. Okay. The number of people over the age of 80 in Oxfordshire will double, as is the case in every developed country. And the number of people of working age will increase a tiny bit. But this is not a tidal wave of need that is sometimes portrayed, need for health and social care. And I'm going to show you what the revolution is that's needed. Not so much to increase life expectancy, although the lower life expectancy in deprived subgroups is a serious issue, but what we call healthy life expectancy. So imagine you're a group of old people in the Bowls Club in Marston Ferry Road, or a Bridge Club in Whitney, or a church hall in Whitnam. So here's what I would be saying. If I can make it move on now. Next, please. So there's only two phases in life: a phase of growth and development, a turning point, and then it's downhill all the way. But don't get too depressed, because that can be influenced. Next, please. Because aging by itself is not a cause of problems until the late 90s. And problems are caused by other processes. You see, you do need a bit of luck to be born to the right parents. And it seems that parents who value education is even more important than parents who are wealthy. Genetics doesn't seem to be that important. But you also need luck to avoid the diseases we can't prevent, like Parkinson's and rheumatoid. But aging is not a cause of problems until the late 90s. Next, please. The problems are caused by three other processes. The first of which is loss of fitness, which we first described in Oxford in the 1980s. So what you can see here is a turning point. And the turning point is usually in the early 20s, when people get their first sitting job, usually with their first car. And they spend the next 40 or 50 years of their life at a car or a desk or sitting in meetings. I mean, even the chap who was digging the road outside my office was only moving 2 thumbs because he was on a digger. So a gap opens up between the best possible rate of decline and the actual rate of decline. And we published in the BMJ last week what we call the second pandemic. And that's the lockdown pandemic, the implications of isolation, which I'll come back to, and inactivity. And we will see that this winter in the demand for social services and the demand for healthcare. And I'll come on to what we can do starting now to attack that. Next, please. So aging is an important issue because it reduces your resilience. And the longer you are inactive, the more difficult it is to recover. That's one of the effects. There's no doubt there's such a thing as aging. So fitness is key. And as you see here, we think of 3 dimensions of fitness: physical, emotional, and cognitive. And this is the 3D fitness program. And I will deal with cognitive and emotional a little bit later. Next, please. So in addition to the fitness and aging, the third factor is disease. And disease increases with age. Not so much because of aging, but because we've lived in a certain environment for longer. We have what is sometimes called a Paleolithic body in a post-Paleolithic world. We weren't meant to sit with high-calorie foods easily available to us. And again, we can see this happening more and earlier. So people in deprived subgroups of the population develop these disabling conditions about 10 years earlier because of the effects of deprivation. Now, what happens after the onset of disease is that the fitness gap gets wider faster, partly because of the disease. For example, I had a stent and lost some myocardial tissue, so my maximum pulse rate isn't as good as it was. But the big factor is the fourth factor that affects us as we live longer: negative beliefs and attitudes. So when someone develops a disease, the natural reaction is for them to do less. Oh, I don't like to see my mum struggling to the shops. I got Ocado to deliver. That same person who doesn't like to see his mum struggling to the shops is paying money to belong to a gym where he struggles. It's called training. And there comes a point at which you may drop below the line. And I haven't got this adopted yet by WHO, but the line is the point at which you can't get to the toilet in time. And after that, it's game over. Referred for social care, or maybe sent up to the John Radcliffe with a chest infection or some problem like that, but it's actually loss of resilience. Next, please. Because you see, it's this loss of resilience that is the key issue. And that means this winter that people will be referred to the John Radcliffe with a combination of disease and loss of fitness. Next, please. And although the doctors don't like to call it off legs, that's what it is. So what's the strategy? And it's at a population level, and we're doing this nationally. So there are four things. First, we have to understand what is going on with aging. There's a loss of maximum ability, starting about the age of 40. I mean, if you train full time, you can keep going till about 40, as Roger Federer and Serena Williams are finding out at the moment. But it's a loss of resilience. Now, that's the same as the effects of loss of fitness, loss of maximum ability and loss of resilience or reserve. But here we're talking about physical, cognitive, and emotional. Thirdly, we need to prevent and tackle disease, but we don't need more conventional healthcare. And perhaps the most important thing is think positive. Next, please. So the aim is to increase health span and to reduce the duration of multi-morbidity. And I believe we can significantly reduce the need for social care. We are working with a number of populations around the country where this is now part of the strategy, a very clear approach. Next, please. So here's the new agenda. We've got the traditional public health agenda, but here's the new agenda. Firstly, get even fitter, and every year do even more. Every year, do even more. My birthday is next week, so I will add one more press up, because every man should be able to do the same number of press ups as their age. I do mine in 2 batches, but so every year, do a little more. Every diagnosis, do even more. So we need social prescribing to prescribe activity with trainers, both voluntary, Tai Chi and Pilates being part of the prescription. Secondly, reduce the risk of dementia. And we can reduce the risk of dementia significantly. Alzheimer's cannot be prevented, but many people develop dementia because of damage to the brain tissue from sleep disorders or over medication or by vascular problems to the brain. And perhaps the most interesting, which I'm going to finish on, is to do with social engagement and isolation. So the third thing is to do even more for other people and strengthen sense of purpose. Next, please. So here's a new book, The 100-Year Life, and that's going to be children born now, 50% will live to be 100. But we need to move from 3 phases, childhood, work, and retirement, to think of multi-phase. And I don't like the word retirement. We should do away with it and call it renaissance, because everyone should be doing more for other people. And this fascinating article in the Journal of the American Medical Association written by a very distinguished scientist. But as you can see, his prescription was not the human genome. It was renewing purpose, building and sustaining social engagement, and embracing a positive lifestyle. Next, please. So the revolution is we do away with the concept of care, meaning doing things for other people. Let's smash it. We need to enable people to do things for themselves and for others. But we cannot do that only with rehabilitation. There's not enough physios and OTs and doctors around. We have to start doing things in a completely different way, and it means doing less care and more enabling. Next, please. So here's what we need, purpose. So what I would like to see would be if we took the housebound people of Oxfordshire, I haven't quite worked out the numbers that there are, there's maybe 10,000 housebound people, that we would be reaching them every day. We should obviously get them out more, but we would reach them every day. We need to get everyone online, but online with virtual reality, because I would like to see cycling groups in, say, Witney and Abingdon. And these group cycling would be done at home. And you don't need to buy a peloton to do it. You can do it for a much lower cost. They'd be doing it in groups, cycling from Land's End to John O'Groats or across the Swiss Alps. They would have a social purpose. They'd be raising money for the Bucks, Barks and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust, and they'd be competing. The older people of Witney would be competing with the older people of Abingdon or the older people of North Oxford. That would get motivation going, wouldn't it? So that's the mission, is to increase healthy life expectancy, and activity, physical, cognitive and emotional is a very important part to play. And as you may know, we've launched a program where people like me who can afford not to use their fuel allowance will give it to other people. And we do that through Age UK and Active Oxfordshire. And we want to really dramatically increase activity, particularly for people who are housebound in their 70s, 80s and 90s, and at a younger age in deprived subgroups of the population. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mule. That was really inspiring. I really love the idea of retirement being renamed Renaissance. I like that here. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So we move on now to our last speaker, and I'm delighted to introduce Mike Diper from Sport England, who is going to talk a bit about the work that we're doing across Oxfordshire, some of the implications obviously around COVID-19, but also the development of the future strategy for Sport England. So Mike, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and good afternoon. I'm really delighted to be with you all this afternoon. And can I just say on behalf of everyone at Sport England, how important the partnerships we've been building over the last 18 months to 2 years are with us. I think they've always been important, but right now they're even more important. So thank you for what you're doing. So I'm going to quickly look and say a little bit about activity levels and how they've been impacted by the pandemic. Look at our response and then round off, as Alan said, on our strategy. And ahead of the COVID hitting us, actually, numbers were moving in the right direction, and we shouldn't probably lose sight of that, because those gains were really hard earned, and we know those gains lead to healthier, happier, stronger, more resilient people and communities. So the adult numbers were activity levels were at a historic high. Inactivity had dropped, and it was a trend for the first time over 4 years. Inactivity was at its lowest level, and the children's numbers were moving in the right direction. But as Ansar said in his presentation, we mustn't kid ourselves. For all that good news, there are some massive inequalities, and they centre around income, gender, ethnicity, and that's been brought into really stark relief by Black Lives Matters and people with disabilities and long-term conditions. Next slide, please. So what's happened because of pandemic? What we've been doing is working with ComsRes and we publish data across each week for the first 8 weeks of the lockdown, so the most severe bit of the lockdown. We're now moving to monthly, and the strongest message is massive disruption. But actually, it's not all negative. We've seen people doing exercise for the first time. All of those people who would never have wanted to exercise in public or go to the gym or a leisure centre, they have responded to some of the calls for building exercise into your life is important. We've seen families doing things together, often for the first time. So there are some positives, but also across the first 6 weeks, we saw those who were already struggling. So women and girls, some BAME groups, people with disabilities or long-term conditions, older people struggled even more. And if you remember, the gains we've seen in activity levels have come from women, older people, people with disabilities. So we've put all of that hard-earned gain at risk. What we've seen in then the last 2 weeks of the hard lockdown was a bit of a recovery, particularly around gender, a little less around age. But if you're Black, if you've got a long-term health condition, if you're an older person, you really do worry as lockdown eases about going outside, and that's not going to go away. Next slide, please. So, like all organisations, what we've done is totally refocus what we've been doing around the 4 priorities on your screen. 3 of those are external. 1, like all organisations, we've been looking after our team and our business. We've set aside 210 million to help as much of the sector survive as possible. That includes rollover funding for Active Oxfordshire. It's also been about providing advice and help. It's been about bringing on a new campaign to keep people active. It's been about influencing government. And I know there's been loads of great stuff happening here locally. Next slide, please. Just to hone in on some of the areas of support just a little bit more, let's start with the emergency fund. We've made over 7,500 awards, totaling 28 million, paid out already 15 million to clubs and small grassroots groups. Oxfordshire has received over 100 awards, something like 363,000 10k to Didcot Town FC, 2,000 to Wheels for All in Oxfordshire, 2,000 to the Kidlington Recreation Trust, all just helping those groups survive. But we're really conscious that open funding rarely gets to where it's most needed. So we set up a second fund, Tackling Inequalities, which is focused around the less affluent, BAME groups, disabled people, and active partnerships, including Active Oxfordshire, are helping us share that funding out. It's 20 million. Active Oxfordshire's first share is 50k. Doesn't sound much, but there's lots more on offer, and I know Paul and the team are getting things out there and helping. We've also been then really using the Join the Movement campaign. It was a brand new campaign on TV, radio, through social media, created in just a week during lockdown, and also our We Are Undefeatable campaign, which targets older people, people with long-term health conditions. There's going to be a new advert and a new burst starting very soon, 5th of July. And that's had massive reach to that audience. 97% of the target audience have seen it. More importantly, 57% have actually responded and done something. And that might be just walking, might be doing some exercise in their homes for the first time, but it's the first step to getting people active. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to remind you that those things aren't happening in isolation to the great partnership we've already established. You can see the 3 themes. There's over £1 million going into these. The FAST, Families Active Sporting Together, has just been brilliant. And thank you to all the local partners who've made it such a success. It's helped 1,000 families already. It's running across Kidlington, Bicester and Banbury, and it's been great that it's been kept going. Next slide, please. And then finally from me, I did just want to round off on the next phase of our strategy. We've, like everybody, like you, had to focus on the here and now, but I think it is important to try and lift ourselves up. We've delayed the next phase, start of the next phase of our strategy till from September this year till April next year, but we did go ahead with publishing the direction of travel. I think the document was included in your packs for today via the email. What that's doing is setting out action around the belief that when we move, we are stronger. And we've heard such great examples of that this morning, haven't we? And what we're trying to do, so this is shaping our future, isn't the new strategy. What it's doing is playing back the really important key messages and themes we've heard. So things like, and trying to test those again. So first and foremost, focus on movement. That embraces all of activity, from all the traditional things in sport to play to walking to cycling. Continue to be about activity for a purpose, whether that be people's health, community resilience, the economy, people's personal well-being. Deliver through mature, collaborative and value-based partnerships, and I'd like to think that's what we've been developing with you across the last 18 months to 2 years. Certainly feels like that from our side. We've also been told, be totally unashamed about channeling resources to where they're most needed. So for you, that would be going to the wards, the target audiences which are inactive, and helping them more. For us, it is all about tackling inequalities, getting that need to where it is most needed. We've also heard that we need to support the backbone of activity and sport. What we've sometimes done in Sport England strategies is ping pong, or a massive pendulum swing from it's all about national governance, it's all about sport, to it's all about walking and things. We're trying not to unbalance the ecosystem, and I'd love to hear from you on that. And then also a sense that we need to, as Sport England, and with our active partnerships, step up on the big issues. So one right in the media at the moment, race and sport, and what more can we do to challenge the inequalities and the unfairness and the discrimination there. Also, the deals our kids get in some schools isn't good enough in starting them on their active lives. Next slide, please. Very quickly on this, this is our timeline. Just wanted to really emphasize, I really do want to hear from you. Today's part of that conversation and a chance. Please don't sugarcoat what you've got to say. We need to know what's good, what's missing, what we should drop. And I know we've always had really honest feedback. And then final slide from me, please. Just wanted you to pose this question. I'll let you read it for yourself. Yes, times are tough, but there are opportunities, and I didn't think I would be saying that. Exercise has never had a higher profile, from the Prime Minister to the Chief Medical Officer saying day after day, exercise is one of the things we're allowed to do. It's one of the things we should do. I think we share a real common purpose. It's why the partnerships work, and namely, it's fighting inactivity to improve lives. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that. Again, a really kind of inspiring presentation, and good to hear there was lots of stuff on the chat. I was noticing that lots of support for the, or welcome, gratitude for the community support that Sport England have been giving to organisations. So that's fantastic. Thank you all very much. So thank you to all the speakers, and from me personally, thank you all for keeping to time, because that's been fantastic. So now we'll move on to the more interactive session. So Rosie, are you there to hand over and pick up the Q&A?
Thanks, Alan. Yes, I am. So can I ask all the speakers to ensure that they are unmuted? And Val, I think you're going to stand in for Anzaf as he's got to go to the Health and Wellbeing Board. So if you could unmute yourself as well. I'm going to take chair's prerogative initially and ask a question for everyone on the panel about people who've got long-term conditions and who've probably been included as part of the shielded list. Many of them will have been older people who would have been volunteering and who may have lost that sense of purpose and certainly lost the activity levels that they may well have done before lockdown. How do we particularly help them as restrictions ease to regain a positive attitude and that sense of purpose that Muir identified? How can we enable and support them to get back into exercise and movement? Who would like to go first? Muir?
Well, I have been thinking about the idea of national service for everyone over 70. This idea that we have things to do, and I think what we might do with HUK and with the Winter Warmth campaign, I think we should link activity to green, and there's increasingly strong evidence, as you know, Rosie, about the nature and activity being very important. So why doesn't the activity world, which is on this this team meeting, why don't we say adopt the Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust, and we start approaching everybody to say, would they like to now get sponsoring? Because even housebound people, and I'm keeping my distance, I can tell you that, but the Active 10 app measures very accurately how many minutes you walk briskly on the spot. So I would like to launch, and we may do this linked to the next winter fuel initiative. I think we should be saying, well, we need now to look at our environment, to create an environment for young people, and we need young people to go out and improve the physical environment, and people like me should be raising money for that. Now that maybe we need to offer people 2 or 3 different charities they should support, but that's a suggestion that we give people a reason, and also it does help the NHS. It would undoubtedly reduce acute admissions this winter if we got people going. So the next thing to do to help the NHS is get off your area is the programme.
Thank you, Mia. That's really helpful. Anyone else on the panel want to add a comment about or a response to that question about how we can support our previously shielded individuals?
Rosie, can I come in on that, please? And it kind of goes to the heart of why we've worked really hard to have another phase of We Are Undefeatable, and why it's starting in July. So we've completely revamped with the 15 health and social care charities which are part of the campaign. So HUK, stroke, versus arthritis, etc. Really simple things which can be done in the home or in your garden. And actually some of the feedback we've got during lockdown is actually people with long-term health conditions have been really worried about stopping exercise. So for example, I was talking to the chief exec at Versus Arthritis. Their helpline has got, the number of calls has gone up by over 400% during lockdown, and they estimate about 80% of the calls have been about how do I keep moving, because it's been one of the things which has helped me manage my arthritis. So those sorts of things are going to help, and I guess it is about building people's confidence. Also, it's giving them permission to move, to get outside in a healthy, safe way.
I think you raise a really important issue there, Mike, and certainly from an NHS perspective, I think there's some real opportunities there at diagnosis with long-term conditions to give people that reassurance. And I think that picks up Muir's point about every diagnosis do even more. It's changing the messaging. So I think from one of my issues with Sport England's strategy at the moment is that it doesn't make enough of that in terms of how the NHS needs to contribute and can link in with this activity. So I'd encourage you to beef that element up in future.
Point taken.
If I could just comment, Rosie, sorry to butt in again, but one of the things we're doing in Sheffield and Plymouth and Lancashire, but not yet in Oxfordshire, is the GPs now know everyone's telephone number, and they know who's got a quotes mobile phone quotes now. So we're looking at ways we can get monthly and weekly support from the health centre. Obviously, the Undefeatables is great, but I think it's this idea of the NHS actively promoting activity. Yeah. So there are the technologies there to do that too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Val, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, Rosie, I just think another important aspect is addressing the confidence of people that are now concerned about taking up exercise and want to be encouraged. Some of that can really be supported through some kind of buddying system, or making sure that the social prescribing refers people to some of these excellent initiatives like we've heard about Active Oxfordshire. So I think that would be really, really a positive thing to think about.
And we have some of the systems in place already, don't we, in terms of both buddying from voluntary organisations and also some of the coaching, not just social prescribing, but all the work that the districts do through the Go Active Get Healthy for diabetes work. So a lot of the systems are in place. It's just making sure we really maximise their use and fund people to be able to provide more support. We can't expect it without some funding. I'm going to take Chair's prerogative and just ask Councillor McHugh if you'd like to make a comment.
Unmuting. Yeah, thanks, Rosie. When have you known a councillor not want to make a comment? A few points really I'd like to make is I've really enjoyed today. It's not often you come to a meeting and you see something that is, you hear something completely new. I think the message that comes out loud and clear from all of this is never let a good crisis go to waste. And we've been talking about what is going to be the new normal. Well, again, the best way to predict what the new normal is going to be is to create it. The first time I met Mike, I think, was at Rose Hill Centre when we had a presentation from somebody who was talking about Fitterix, about how if exercise was a drug and it wasn't being prescribed on the NHS, there would be an absolute scandal. And that's really what we need to be getting over. And this time, it's a theme that's run through everything.
Dr. William Byrne. Yeah, Dr. William.
I was really pleased to hear what Sarah was doing, in really practical things about getting people to swim and to ride bikes. That was great. Ansaf, I mean, I seem to follow Ansaf around listening to the similar presentations. But actually, he's gone off to the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is where I'll be going shortly, where he will be presenting the ward profile on Ruscote. And we know that the disadvantaged children in Ruscote are probably the people who are going to be hit hardest by the lack of schooling over the lockdown. And they will also probably be hit hardest by the lack of sporting facilities, and we've made great progress in that area, and we really need to get back to it. Aspire, Nikki and Ross, great. The gym bus. If the people won't go to the gym will go to the people. Really well done. Dick, rather like you, I didn't get the wake up call, but I have lost 18 kilos and I've had to buy a completely new. And the point that you made, which I think is really important, is that exercise is great, but it's exercise and diet that makes the big change. So that was great. Sir Muir Gray, a health insurgent. I mean, absolutely revolutionary. And as I say, it's not often I come to somewhere and hear something that I haven't heard before or in such a great form. I would also remind us all, though, that we all need to be insurgents, but the insurgent is a fish that swims in a sea of popular support, and we need to be building that popular support. Mike, great, talking about disruption. It's not all negative. We are about recalibrating the new normal. And one of the things I'd like to throw out as a challenge to all of us, we've got 750,000 people across the country who volunteered to be NHS volunteers. And I'm one of those, and I haven't exactly been rushed off my feet, but there is a great willingness of those people, and we can't let that resource go to waste. One thing we're talking about resources. Every Cherwell district councillor was given £2,000 to spend on COVID-related activities. Now, I've been deliberately holding back on spending mine because I realise that as we come out of lockdown, there is going to be more to spend it on to do good. And so bear in mind that is, whether that's been happening across other districts would be great. My other big concern, which is something we all need to fight against, is that district councils and the county council are under increasing pressure. We've got costs that we weren't having to meet before COVID. We're losing income that we because of COVID, and you see where I'm coming from. There are going to be siren calls saying, let's go back to just doing what our statutory requirements are. And for district councils, that would be planning and emptying the bins. We have to be bigger than that, and we have to be lobbying at every level to say, let's keep this going, let's keep this going. I think what I've heard today, yes, you can tell me, it's fired me up. Thank you very much to everybody. I'm sorry, that was probably a bit too long, Rosie.
That's fine. I've got a question for that I'd like to pick up from the meeting chat that Louise Upton, Councillor Upton had. Louise, do you want to just ask a follow-up in terms of your question about the Aspire bus?
Oh, thanks, Rosie. Yes, it was that I just wanted to hear whether I can see that they're going into places that are really hard to get to, and that is fantastic. I just wondered whether within those places, whether they had specialist schemes for getting hold of the really hard to reach groups like BAME women.
Yeah, just turn this on. No, really, as yet, but because it's, well, where we sort of stood before, it was that we were literally at a point where we were ready, just got the bus ready, and we were really going out there. And part of it now is that we've really had to sort of just draw a line in the sand, and it's looking at, we really need to sort of target some of these areas. So really encourage any sort of partnership or insights or people that are sort of actively engaged in some of these more harder to reach areas where we can really sort of just target any sort of groups really that are just inactive or shielded, or looking at, because it's the gym bus it's there to sort of encourage people to get active, but it's also that other sort of wraparound support as well. So it's with sort of inequalities and people that are experiencing hardships, especially now. It's the homelessness prevention support, it's the support around benefits, it's learning those basic sort of digital and IT skills that can then help you to navigate the internet, maybe connect with some sort of fitness apps, but also connect with a sense of community through that as well. So it's it's definitely something that we are keen to look at now. So it's just how we can sort of best link up with other sort of groups. Maybe we could follow up afterwards. Maybe we have a bit of discussion just to look at maybe targeting sort of more sort of like specific groups. And any ideas you've got around that would be brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure now that I know you exist, we can put you together with different community groups.
Yes, please. Yes, okay. Yes, brilliant.
Thanks, Nikki and Louise. I want to pick up one other question for Mike Diper before I hand back to Alan. And I think it is a really important question about whether the strategy is going to take into account early years children. Certainly the healthy place shaping work that we've been doing in Charwell, we initially were looking from at over fives and realized very quickly we needed to start from the noughts onwards, 0 to 5 included. And then also thinking about the very eldest in society. So, Mike, can I ask you to respond to that question about lifespan?
Yeah. So officially, our age range starts at 5. That's the remit which government has set us, and it goes right up to 103, 5, whatever. So at the moment, early years work isn't officially part of us. But we have definitely blurred the edges with our family's work, with our place-based work, because I totally believe in a whole life, pre-birth, right to the other end. It would help me incredibly if you feel as strongly as I do on this matter, if you would go onto our website, go to the strategy link and say your remit should include early years.
Thanks, Mike. That's a really, really useful prompt for us. And I would really encourage everyone on the call to do exactly that. And also to provide any other comments that you have about the strategy. I think a lot of the principles and the approach absolutely reflects the approach we've been taking in Oxfordshire. But I think we need to reinforce that and say, yes, you're on the right lines. So I'm going to hand back to Alan now to just sum up and confirm any next steps coming out of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Rosie. So firstly, thank you all. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. We've had some really inspiring presentations and discussions today and case studies. So thank you all. That was really, really inspiring. As Rosie said, there's lots of different ways to get engaged. You can talk to Mike about the Sport England strategy. We've got in our pack, we sent out our 10 ambitions with our 5 key high-level questions, and it'd be wonderful to get you all involved in that. I think that the thing I just wanted to leave with, I think there's some high-level messages that I've kind of picked up from today. There was around the Ansaf was talking about the inequalities, and that's a really important issue for us in Oxfordshire, and it often gets masked, and I think it's important that we need to flag that up. And I really like his saying that we're in the same storm but not necessarily in the same boat. So I think that's a really important thing to take away, and that presents us with some challenges, but we also have a lot of opportunities. There's some opportunities that were coming up. Muir talked about the opportunities around, creating the sense of purpose and enabling the elderly people to be much more independent, and promotion. I really like the idea of moving away from retirement to renaissance. And Andrew, Councillor McHugh, you talked about never wasting a crisis, and I think that's really important, and there's an opportunity for us here to do something about that. And we've heard about the support and resources that are available from Sport England, from the CCG, from the local authority, to really help us do this and move on. So I suppose what I wanted to sort of leave us with, and I'm getting a note saying my Mac is about to die because I'm about to run out of battery. So basically, I think we've created a coalition of the willing here. We all need to come together, and hopefully it would be great if you could all join us in this journey that we're all embarking on to create Oxfordshire as a world leading place, actually, in terms of supporting people to get more active, supporting people to be more sporty, and really reducing the inequalities that there are across the county. So thank you all for your support. Thank you for making this a very easy task in sharing this, and hopefully we'll all meet up again soon in different circumstances to take this work forward. So thank you all very much. And I think actually that's 1:30, so we can all close at 1:30. So great, have a good day, and I'll see you all soon, hopefully. Bye.